So my best expertise comes not from UCLA, it comes from my experience. Okay? So I want to welcome you. How many people are new tonight for the first time? Great, excellent. And others were here last week. Yeah, Jeff always tells me we can expect one person or 100,000. Okay, so I'm prepared no matter what. So what I'd like to do is, as you probably know, this is a 6-week series, and I'm going to be covering through these 6 weeks different ways to practice and different ways to think about mindfulness. But if you drop in, you'll be able to pick up wherever we are, because I'll do a little summary. And these practices are, it's kind of cumulative. You build skills, you may be beginning, but as you practice more, you become more expert. I have allergies, so if you can't hear me in the back, just raise your hand, okay? I was thinking, how many people saw the series Ted Lasso? It's one of my favorite of all time. I channel Roy Kent. Okay, with these allergies. Yeah. So in summary, last week, I asked the question, why do we do this practice? And some of what I talked about, which I'll summarize now, is that, the Buddha was an extraordinary human being. We pretty much know he existed. And what's taught here, what's taught all over the world, is really the direct teachings from the Buddha, but in different forms. And many scholars talk about, we should really say Buddhisms, not Buddhism, because as the teachings of the Buddha over thousands of years moved from culture to culture, people adapted them to their own culture, their own needs. So Buddhism, as the teaching of the Buddha, moved from India, really Nepal, and India to China, became Chan, or Zen, moved to China, moved to Japan, Korea, and then in the 1960s and 70s, people like John Kabat-Zinn, Joseph Goldstein, Sharon Salzberg, famous Western teachers who are now elderly, they brought these teachings to the West. And as Thich Nhat Hanh once said, we're developing Buddhism, or the Buddha with the Western face, okay? So the Buddhism, as we practice it and know it, is really adapting to our culture. And one of the most common practices is all over the culture now is mindfulness. Every time you turn around, you see the term mindfulness. So the question last week was, why do we practice? And what I suggested is that the early teaching of the Buddha, when he was asked, what do you teach? He basically said, I teach suffering and the relief of suffering. Suffering and the relief of suffering. And some people find that kind of depressing. Is that what you're going to focus on, is suffering? Well, but the relief of suffering is huge. But in this culture, we have a broader vision of what it means to be a human being than just relieving our suffering. And that vision comes from our understanding from medicine and health and wellness, is that a human being can be well-being. The Buddha, we're never going to see in the suttas the Buddha saying something like, well, be sure and eat your vegetables and exercise, okay? And yet we know that's really important to be a full human being. So what I'd like to see, not just I, but teachers suggest that the goal of our practice is comprehensive well-being, or as a human being, developing ourselves throughout our lives to be the best humans we can be. And we can see within our own culture that how that's developed. Dan Harris, the ABC morning, I guess he was, morning ABC anchor. He's retired now, but he's a big mindfulness guy. And he tells the story, which I love, that, and I said this last week, if in 1930, if somebody said to you, I was running this morning, you would have said, who was chasing you, right? We wouldn't say that today. We wouldn't assume, unless some neighborhoods you might. But we would assume they were jogging for health. Okay? So health and wellness is a part of how we understand, even if we don't do it. I mean, it's probably nobody's going to argue with good diet and exercise. Even if we don't do it, we do understand that being fully human has to do with comprehensive wellness. So these practices the goal of these practices can be that. And in the model that I teach and that I've been trained in, there's 5 different elements of happiness. And it comes from the Greek term eudaimonia, or eudaimonia, which really means flourishing. But happiness is not getting that new car or 2 pieces of chocolate cake that make us happy, because we know from the science there's something called the hedonic treadmill. Anybody heard of the hedonic treadmill? Yeah. Which really says that pleasures like that, like getting the new car, like having some event happen, at the beginning there's happiness, but the more we do it, the less fulfilling it becomes. And we know that to be true. That first piece of chocolate cake is a delight. The second is good. The third makes us sick, right? So the hedonic treadmill means that we need a deeper experience, a deeper way of understanding happiness. And here's the dimensions of eudaimonia, or happiness as a goal of practice. One is what the Buddha taught, relief from suffering. And for us, mostly, it's about relief from either pain in the physical body or stress. Secondly, the goal is to enhance our fulfillment. So not just to relieve suffering, but to really make the quality of our lives more rich and fulfilling. That's where the flourishing comes. Third thing is that these practices, the goal can be to understand ourselves better. As we meditate with mindfulness techniques, we begin to understand how our minds work. And that's critical. So there's a psychological component. And then master life skills. And these practices can be applied to anything from learning the piano to communicating better, to art, to the job you do, even driving. You can apply mindfulness to master skills for living. And then lastly, service, improving the world. As we become more mindful and grow as human beings, we have more to offer in terms of our place in the world. So, in summary, why do we practice? To be happy in all these dimensions. Okay? Now, the model I teach and that I've been trained in, that came many years after I started a Buddhist practice, is called Unified Mindfulness. And it's a system, as I mentioned last week, that the teacher Shinzen Young, who at one point was a Buddhist monk in Japan, was a Vipassana teacher in LA. He's an American. He's almost 80 now. But he got interested in science early on in his Buddhist practice. He said, the world understands life through science. So is there a way to bring science and Buddhist practice together in a way that fits for people who live today? And that's what he's done. He's developed a system called a comprehensive system that these techniques I'm teaching come out of. And the marks of this system are that, first of all, it's a comprehensive system that's compatible and based on cognitive science. Cognitive science can explain what we're doing. Then secondly, it's science-based, but it's algorithmic. So places like Harvard and Stanford and Carnegie Mellon, University of Arizona are using this model to do the research because it is so much more precise and it's science-based. Okay? And then the other thing is it's really amazing. You can use these techniques in your daily life. Now, for me personally, I sat for long years on a cushion with my eyes closed, doing the traditional breath awareness, which is great. That is a good way to practice. But then I got to a point where it probably had some effect, but I would get up and then go about my day and never think about my practice after that. And then when I began to do this practice, because it can be done anywhere, anytime, by anybody actually, I began to notice that through the day, when I was driving, when I was eating, when I was talking, when I was doing my job, when I was having a conflict with somebody, I could use these skills. And you'll see tonight as I lead us through see, hear, feel, and the skills of mindfulness, that you can see how they will apply. Okay? And then the other thing is that these skills or these techniques are applicable to anybody, anywhere. So this morning, I retired from Sharp Healthcare after 20 years, and partly the last 6 years I taught mindfulness at Sharp. Kind of unretired, and they've asked me to come back sometime. So this morning, I was teaching what we're going to do today, or tonight. I was teaching that to 50 nurses on the ICU at Sharp Grossmont Hospital. And now, that's a secular environment. I can't teach Buddhism there. It's the workplace. There's going to be Christians and atheists and agnostics and Muslims. It wouldn't be appropriate. But I could teach exactly what I'm going to teach you tonight. And here I am in a Buddhist temple with many of you being Buddhists, including me, and these techniques also apply. So what's the question this week? Last week, why do we do this? This week is, what is mindfulness? So if I ask that question, what comes to mind? What's your first thought?
Awareness.
Awareness? Yep, that's the most common. What else? Anything else? Yes?
Just being present in the moment, enjoying the moment.
Yes, exactly. So years ago, one of the physicians at Sharp, and so he was a surgeon. Surgeons they don't mind telling you what they think. So in my class, somebody said, well, it's being present, being aware, and he said, what in the hell does that mean? That it doesn't tell me anything. Yes?
The state of awareness or being present, what is that? What is the definition of that? Because I hear it all the time.
Yes.
But I can also predict, if I ask them what is happening in your head right now, there'd be a lot of chatter.
Yeah, exactly. So, the definition can be more precise than just being in the present moment. Because if you think about it, where else are we? And your body is always in the present moment. What's not in the present moment at times? The mind. We drift to the past in memory. We go to the future in imagination. And then we would say, well, I'm not in the present moment. But we really are here. Until we can bilocate in some way, we're always going to be in the present moment. But the definition can be more precise. So one way to define mindfulness is, and it's a description. So I'm going to give you a more precise definition, and you don't have to accept it. We'll do it tonight. You can experience it. A description is that you know when you're seeing, you know when you're hearing, and you know when you're feeling. You know when you're seeing, you know when you're hearing, you know when you're feeling. Years ago, one of the nurses at Sharp said to me in a class, after I offered that as a definition or a description, And she said, well, as I think about it, we're doing that all the time. Everything we do in waking moments is we're seeing, hearing, or feeling. And that includes we're thinking and we're having emotions. Okay? So we're going to include, I'm going to lead you through it, we're going to include visual thinking and auditory thinking as see and hear, and emotions as feel, in addition to what we normally experience. So, and by the way, feel free to just raise your hand if you have a comment, question, or objection, okay?
So there's a term called metacognition. In other words, it's not that I just see, because everybody sees, everybody hears, everybody.
Right.
Like awareness always has an object.
Right.
So I'm aware that I'm seeing. I'm aware that I'm hearing.
Yes.
I'm aware of a thought in my head.
Yes.
As opposed to seeing, hearing, feeling.
Yes, being lost in it. Did everybody hear that? So that, the term metacognition is that awareness. We talk about focus or concentration, and then we talk about awareness, larger awareness. The way I like to think about it is that concentration or focus is like going into a dark room with a flashlight and you pinpoint certain things in the dark. That's what we do with concentration. Metacognition, awareness is you turn all the lights on. You see everything, okay? So it's a different way of understanding it as well. So let's go ahead and do that, what we call the tour of the senses. So again, you don't have to, I'm not asking you to accept anything I say. Matter of fact, be skeptical, okay? And then check out your own experience. So we're going to do a tour of the senses. We're going to go through see, hear, and feel, out and in. And in doing so, you will have a way of being mindful of everything you can possibly experience. Okay? So let's start with see, and we'll do see in first, meaning visual thinking. One of my favorite way to do this is picture in your imagination your favorite food. Okay? And then notice where it shows up in your imagination. And there is a place in the brain, we can so you might even take your hand if you want. For some people, for me it's ice cream. A bowl of ice cream just popped up. Okay? So for me, it's right here. That's where I picture it. Where is it for you? In front, right here? Yeah. Okay. So it's different for different people, but there is a place where see in images pop up. And so we can be aware, we can be mindful of our thinking visually. And let's see out. Pick something in the room that's interesting or beautiful and just rest your attention on it. And so we're doing this all day long. We're navigating by sight, and if your eyes are closed, there is a dark mental screen that you can see. So we have a see in and a see out. See. Hear is the same thing. We have a hear in. We're talking to ourselves all day long. I don't know about you, but sometimes I get tired of hearing myself talk, okay? And there's ways to work with that. So right now, a simple way is just recite your phone number to yourself. Can you hear it? And where do you hear it? Here. Where else? Where do other people? Right here. Okay. I hear it. Both of your ears. Yeah. We'll call that. We'll call that your sound screen. Okay. And again, when you're thinking, you can be mindful of what you're seeing, what you're hearing. That's powerful because thoughts and emotions tend to take us away and we get lost. most easily. So here's a way to be aware of this internal experience. Now let's do, so that's here in, let's hear out. Listen to all the sounds that are going on around us. And notice how many sounds you can hear. There's a whole bunch, okay? So you were just being mindful of sound. And then lastly, feel. And feel can show up as, feel in our emotions in the body. Whether we know it or not, emotions do show up in the body. We know that to be true when we get really angry. Do you know where you feel anger? Can you pinpoint where it is? For me, it's like right here, and then in my arms. When I'm angry, yeah, you can feel it. So, we talk about emotional intelligence in psychological situations. Knowing what you're feeling, being able to be mindful of your body and what's showing up is really critical to emotional intelligence. So that's feel in. Feel out is just the sensations in the body. So check in with your body right now. And notice what you feel. And it might be pleasant. Maybe you feel restful. Be unpleasant, maybe have some pain or discomfort. Or it could be neutral. Notice what it feels like with your clothing touching your skin. You can feel my shirt right here. It's kind of neutral. I wouldn't say it's pleasant. It's not unpleasant. So all experience, and the Buddha taught this. It's really the valence. It's the Vedana, as the Buddha taught. It's that sensation of our experience that we can identify as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Okay? It's a great example of how the teaching directly from the Buddha is now showing up in science. This is cognitive science. So, if see, hear, feel, seeing, hearing, and feeling is a description of mindfulness, what's a definition? And that's what we're going to do tonight and really focus on. In Unified Mindfulness, mindfulness is defined precisely as 3 mental skills, 3 muscles you develop. And that's why we train and why we practice. And I'll go through all 3, and we'll do a practice, meditation, so that you can actually experience these 3 mental muscles at work that you can train. So, the 3 mental muscles, the 3 skills are concentration, clarity, and equanimity. We say C, C, and E, okay? Concentration, clarity, and equanimity. So concentration, how's that defined? Very simply, it's your ability to choose what to focus on that's important to you. The ability to choose what to pay attention to. And we know from our experience in cognitive science, what we choose to pay attention to is what we're going to experience. That's what our life is about, choosing what to experience. What gets in the way of our ability to choose?
Craving.
What's that?
Or craving.
Craving, yes.
Or aversion.
Or aversion, yes. Things we want, and there's a lot out there, right? Or things we don't want. Yeah, we live in a complex, it's just increasing. I don't know about you, I'm 77 years old, and when I think back when I was 40 or 50, the world was slower, simpler. We're living in a world that's getting more complicated and more difficult and lots of pain. So having this ability to choose what to pay attention to, to cut through the complexity, again, for the purpose of human happiness and service, is critical, is absolutely critical. There's a cartoon that I often use in my classes when we have visuals, and it shows, you may have seen it, it shows it's a cartoon, it shows the Titanic going down and the people in the water, and they've all got their cell phones taking pictures of the Titanic going down. And I think that so captures the world we live in, that we are in a digital world that is set up. It's set up like the slot machines in Las Vegas. We know that to be true. The early developers at Google will now tell us that those engineers were sent to Las Vegas to study how does the slot machine addict you, create an addiction to keep putting money in. And they did the same thing. We've got algorithms and I'm on social media, and Instagram and YouTube, and all the social digital media is algorithmic. That's the big controversy. So it's there to grab our attention. And then we live in a world that's fast-paced, in which there's so much richness that it's hard for us to choose and have that ability. So the ability to focus and choose what's important is critical as a skill for happiness. The second skill of clarity is very simply, it's your ability to track your sensory experience in real time. We just did it. I led you through seeing in and out, hearing in and out, feeling in and out. You were able to distinguish the difference. Now, here's why it's so important to develop this skill. Is that one idea, you can test it out for yourself. One idea is that when we get overwhelmed with a strong emotion or an overwhelming experience, what happens is our senses get tied up in a bundle. Think about the last time you got really angry. Let's say somebody cut you off on the freeway. So what happens in that moment is you probably saw them cut you off, you may have felt fear or anger immediately, and then you might have heard yourself saying something like, "You jerk, I'll get back," whatever it is. And you know what? So what happened is that in a moment, the three senses, see, hear, and feel, internally, bundled together and caused us to react. So what this practice does is it teaches us to unbundle it. That we begin to notice, and actually there's a nurse at Sharp who, her friend would testify that she was a terrible driver and would really be a kind of a rageaholic. And when she began to practice, everybody got surprised because things would happen and she wouldn't react. And what was happening is she was using her practice to notice, see when the car went in front of her, feel when the anger shot up in a minute, and then hear what she was telling herself. And she began to work with see, hear, feel, that it began to unbundle that experience in a moment, and then she could decide what's the most skillful way to react. And, she really took to this idea that that person cutting you off on the freeway, maybe they're a jerk, okay, or they didn't see you. That's a difference. Or it's somebody whose partner or wife is having a baby and they're rushing to the emergency room. How you think about it changes how you feel and how you react. So this ability to be aware of unbundling, see, hear, feel, by just labeling the experience is huge. Okay? So, 2 skills. Concentration, choosing what to pay attention to. Clarity, being aware, tracking your experience. And then the third one is equanimity. And it's a term we don't use much in English, but what it means in our practice is that you have that skill, that ability, to not have to push away your experience or hang on to it. That's the craving and aversion we would talk about. You don't have to react by getting rid of everything that's painful and hanging on to everything that is pleasant. What happens if we do that?
Our world becomes tiny.
Yes, the world shrinks. Well, and we suffer. We suffer. You know, tell yourself, when you get angry, tell yourself immediately, stop being angry. That only makes you more angry, right? Because, you know, it's sort of like thoughts will fuel, thoughts are like fuel. They're like wood to the fire. If you think the guy's a jerk, you are fueling that anger. If you think he didn't see you, it's going to feel different, okay? So this last skill of being able to be balanced and not react immediately is huge. The famous philosopher Viktor Frankl, many of you may know, he survived the concentration camp and then went on to become an incredible commentator on human beings and philosophy. And he made a statement which really captures what I'm talking about. His statement is between stimulus and response is a gap. And in the gap is our human freedom. And that moment that we can be mindful and aware, it can only be a moment, or it can be longer. We can then choose how best to respond instead of react. So let me stop here. What questions or comments do you have? Yes.
I had a thought. I work with kids with disabilities, and we always talk about when we're looking at behaviors that they have like an escalation cycle. So it's like they start here as a trigger, and then they get up here, and then they come back down. So while they're in that cycle, so is the adult that's working with them. So you're also, and we always talk about it thinking about how like your reactions are not going to be like what you want them to be, because you're also, your like ability to make sound judgments is also impaired because you're in that cycle too.
Yes.
So it's like not just them, but you also, but thinking about like what you're talking about with the driver and how like if you pause in those situations and, you know, get present before you react to something, just thinking about putting in that space for you to do that.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's that you have to, I mean, when you're driving in that moment, you can't just stop doing what you're doing, okay? Close your eyes and meditate. This is where you can meditate with your eyes open in this practice. You can do it, what I'm talking about. And the more you practice it, the more instantaneous it becomes. It becomes a habit. You get used to not reacting. Now, sometimes you do, because it's a habit, but most of the time as you practice. The other thing, that's a great example. The example of being able to name your experience is something that we do with kids as a teacher. You know, little Johnny, 6 years old, has an anger problem. He was the first thing he's going to bop, you know, his friend. What do? Well, it doesn't work to tell him not to do it. That's a habit, okay? What we do is we call him aside calmly, we sit him down. We even have a little chart with faces. Here's an angry face, here's a happy face, and a name on it. Anger, joy, whatever it is. We ask him to start naming what he's feeling. So when we can pull him aside and he can begin to do that himself and say, mad. What we know from the cognitive science, and it's the same thing we're doing with labeling, see, hear, feel, in or out. We know from cognitive science that in labeling or naming the experience, we're moving to the prefrontal cortex, the executive function. So when I get charged with anger, if I'm able to label it and be with it, my executive function kicks in and I can make better choices. And that's, again, back to why do we do this? That helps me be a better human being and more effective in the world as well. What else? Other comments or questions or objections? Better yet. Yes?
see, feel, hear. It makes me think of like another strategy called the five senses technique. I'm familiar with. I think about that sometimes, like when I'm driving and want to relax or just be in the moment, you know, think about, okay, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I smelling? What am I touching? What am I tasting?
Yep. That's the practice, really. And we keep it to, in this mindfulness practice, we keep it to keep it simple, we just use see, hear, feel. Because that's powerful. If I can label the feeling of relaxation in my body as feel, and the feeling of pain in my knee as feel, both, it helps equanimity. It helps your equanimity. You're labeling the same thing in the same way and helps you not react as well. Yes?
I was having a difficulty with meditation a number of years ago, and I was fortunate enough that I am sometimes around monks. And I mentioned that I was having trouble with it. When I meditate, was doing formal meditation, he says, well, it's because you're doing it backwards. And he said, on the mat, you're just practicing, that's where you rest. You're resting your mind.
Right.
He says, your practice begins the moment you get off the mat.
Yep.
And,
Yes.
and that
That's right.
really hit me. That's when I started following my breath, when I was walking, when I was driving, when I was listening.
Right.
And so it all becomes meditation in a sense.
Yeah.
And you can do it in the line at the grocery store. Nobody knows you're doing it.
That's right. Exactly.
But at some point, it shifts from being a lot of work to becoming more default.
Right. Yeah, because you're developing your skills. That's what we call these mental muscles. Yeah, Shinzen Young, my teacher, he says the only way you know if your meditation practice is working is if your behavior and what you do in your life is getting better. If you're not getting better, the meditation is not working. You know, it's like get off the cushion. Although we need the cushion, we need to sit, particularly at the beginning, because there's so much and there's so many habits that we have to overcome, that this practice of sitting and with eyes open or closed, and then bring it out into the world, and do that. Equally important is what we do in the world for this practice. Yes, one more thing that was practice.
Well, I didn't practice for a significant 48 years of my life. So I accrued a lot of default way of being, and so if I'm going to practice like an hour on the mat or a half hour or 20 minutes or 10 minutes a day is not going to actually give me enough counterbalance for the 48 years of non-practice that I had practicing something else that was causing me to be miserable.
Yeah.
So the mindfulness gives me an opportunity to practice during all of my waking hours.
That's right. And that's why I say with these techniques where you can do it eyes open or closed, and if truly we are seeing, hearing, and feeling all day long, you can then just to begin to be mindful when you're driving, when you're cooking, when you're walking, anything you're doing, you can be meditating, as we would call it, as well. And you're absolutely right, if we're going to counter however many years that we've trained ourselves, our life has trained us to be in the habits we are, we need to counter that as well. So let's go ahead. Again, I said, don't believe the thing I say. Okay, have you ever had a teacher say that? I mean it, because you can experience this for yourself, and then that's the only way you know. So what I want to do is lead us through a guided meditation in which we're going to use the three skills, concentration, clarity, and equanimity, and you'll experience it. Okay? So you can do this with eyes open or closed, whichever is best for you. And we're going to start with posture. So if you want to just lengthen the spine and loosen and soften your shoulders, your jaw. So lengthen and loosen. And bring your attention to the C category. We're going to focus on concentration skill. So make a choice. Either you can look at something in the room, or if your eyes are closed, just notice that dark screen and rest your attention on an object that you see. Kind of throw your attention gently at the object. And when you notice you're getting distracted, maybe a thought comes up or a sound, just let that be in the background and bring your attention back to what you see. That's your focus. And we'll do this for about a minute. Just keep coming back to what you see. And if you hear a sound, feel something in the body, let it be in the background. Don't fight with it. Bring your attention back to what you see. So we are strengthening the mental muscle of concentration. We're choosing what to pay attention to. Matter of fact, when you get distracted by a sound or a feeling in the body, or you hear yourself with a thought, and you come back, the scientists tell us it's like a bicep curl for the brain. You're strengthening your concentration. Okay, let's use here to strengthen our concentration, and either choosing a sound in the environment or sounds, or you can actually pick a sound that you can say to yourself. It's kind of like a mantra. It could be a pleasant one, so just pick something you hear in or out and rest your attention there. So we just concentrated on sound. You strengthen that concentration muscle with sound. Now let's let that go. And now we'll do feel. And we'll strengthen our concentration skill with feeling in the body. So either notice something that you notice in your body, it can be pleasant or unpleasant, and rest your attention there. It might be feeling of your feet on the floor, or even if you have some pain, just rest your attention there. And if you get distracted, bring your attention back. Okay, we can let that go, feel. So we just did see, hear, feel, and we strengthen our concentration muscle. And I think you can see how you can do that, as this gentleman's pointing out. You can do that all day long. Anytime you remember, you can actually just spend that time really listening, really seeing, really feeling, and you're strengthening the muscle. So let's experiment with clarity, the second skill. Clarity is tracking your sense experience in real time. And maybe a way to do it would be, think about a recent time when you got annoyed, okay? Maybe somebody did cut you off in traffic. Somebody said something that hurt your feelings. Maybe you dropped a cup of coffee. Something that you got annoyed with, okay? So does everybody have something come up? Okay, so now let's pick it apart a little bit. What did you see in? Do you have an image of that event happening? Can you picture it? Okay, so see in. Can you hear yourself describe it or what you said at the moment? Hear. Okay. And is there any feeling tone with it? You got annoyed, maybe you got angry, maybe you got hurt. Can you imagine what it was like that you felt? Okay. So in the moment, it all might have come together and you might have had a reaction. But right now, in thinking about it, we untangled it. And as we practice the skill of clarity, we get in the habit of doing that naturally so that we don't react, okay? And you can experiment with this in your daily life. And let's do equanimity as the last skill. And before we do, I want to share a story I absolutely love. How many people know the teacher Sylvia Boorstein? Yeah, she is like the Jewish grandmother, Buddhist teacher at Spirit Rock. She's 80-some years old. She's one of my dearest teachers and favorites. She tells the story of, being a mindfulness teacher for many years. She was on a plane. She got on a plane, got stuck in the middle seat. Aisle seat was open. Who comes down the aisle to sit there but a mother with an infant crying? And her first thought was, oh no, this is going to be hell. But then her favorite little phrase, she hears herself say this, is, and I love this, may I be present to the moment, may I greet it as a friend. May I be present in the moment, may I greet it as a friend. It seems a little ridiculous to think you could greet a crying baby as a friend, but as we practice equanimity, we get skillful at it. And what she reports is, after her initial reaction of, oh no, every time the baby cried, and she was really having equanimity with the crying, it didn't cry the baby didn't cry that much, but it reminded her of her own children, which was really a sweet thing. And then she had a wonderful conversation where she could join with this poor mom who was suffering more than anybody in the plane, trying to manage this baby. And I think it's such a beautiful example of how we can develop the skill of equanimity. Of again, and what's the definition? It's really not trying to get rid of what we don't want, the baby crying, or hanging on to what we do want, peace and quiet. It's like being in the middle, balanced, and what comes will come. Now, here's the qualification, is that in the real world, it doesn't mean we don't act to change things. So if you're in a relationship that's bad for you, it doesn't mean you just have equanimity with it. You might have equanimity, but it may tell you, get out, stop the harm. So equanimity has more to do about how we experience the world, not about just what we do in the world, okay? That's really important. So let's go ahead and do a little exercise that can help us experience equanimity. And you can do this on your own time. When you say yes to something, it can begin to feel really different than saying no. Just the term yes, yes, yes is really different than no, 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 okay? So let's do that right now. Bring your attention into your body and notice a sensation that you have. And it could be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And just repeat the phrase or the word, yes, in a kind tone. Greet it as a friend. Yes, yes, yes. Let's do that for just a few minutes. And particularly if you have any discomfort, bring yes to it and notice how it might feel different. Okay, we can let go of that. What did you experience in these three mental muscles? Concentration, clarity, and equanimity. What was your experience? Anybody want to share?
Relief.
Relief. Yeah. I teach suffering and the relief of suffering. These practices can calm us down and help us not relate to the world as a foe or an enemy. A baby on a plane next to us doesn't have to be the source of suffering unless we make it that way. What else? Yes.
So I was focusing on the pain in my shoulder, and I'm visited frequently by pain, so I'm kind of used to this. But frequently, I'll notice it and be like, oh, and thoughts will come up, oh, not again, why is it still happening, whatever.
Yeah.
But I've learned to, and you reminded me, because usually I'll just say hello.
Okay.
Yes. So yes or hello helps me not to react to it and tense up against it, which just makes it worse.
Yes.
So it was actually a loosening of the pain or lessening of the pain.
Yeah. That's a great example of equanimity. That's the equanimity skill. Yes.
I work with my pain, but I don't make it my pain. I say,
yes.
oh, this knee, not mine.
Yes.
This knee. Okay, this knee.
That's equanimity.
So it's you're not so attached to this particular knee.
Yes.
This knee. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's why if we're using, and next week I'm going to really focus on this, a technique where we're labeling or naming the experiences, just using see, hear, or feel. Just those three labels. What happens is the pain in the knee becomes a feel, just like the feeling of loving somebody is a feel, It all begins to be just sensation. And that allows us to relate to positive experiences and negative experiences with the equanimity. With equanimity. How about others? What did you experience at this time? So if you experienced boredom and you heard yourself saying, this is the most boring stuff I ever heard, then you were being mindful. Or, maybe you have an objection that you heard yourself say. Again, we can be mindful of any of these experiences that come up, okay? So what I want to suggest in the few minutes we have left, how do we develop these 3 skills? And again, I'm suggesting that this is a definition of mindfulness. It's not just a description, I'm in the present moment. It's a definition that anytime these 3 skills are working together, concentration, clarity, and equanimity, you are being mindful. And all the benefits that come from mindfulness, it can be as simple as feeling calmer. The 50 nurses I taught this morning, some of the feedback was when we did see and hear and feel out, here they are, they're in a really stressful environment. Several of the nurses said, I can't believe it. It's the first time I've ever calmed down at work. They felt calm just by concentrating and being able to be clarity, and have a little equanimity, because there's always a lot of sound going on as well. So these skills can yield the benefits that we seek in the practice that we do as well. So what I want to suggest is this week, if you have an ongoing meditation practice, do what you've been doing. Do the practice, the technique that you like, that works for you. But you could also do a little bit of just labeling your experience. Notice if you're using a mantra, notice it's a here, in, right? Or if you're using a bell, some people use sound for there's sound meditation. That's a here, out. If you're using a statue as an object to meditate, to see out, right? Or you're using an image of, if you have a vision of you're sitting on a beach in Hawaii, okay, that's a see in. You could actually use any of those experiences and begin to label them as a part, and that truly is meditation. It's not just mind wandering, okay? And then the last thing is, in the very last thing, there's a website, and you can just Google Unified Mindfulness. There's a core training, which I think, Marlene, you're doing, right? And it's a cartoon. It takes you through these skills. It's free. It's really fun, but it teaches you how to practice with these skills. Okay, yes?
I just had a question.
Sure.
See in.
Yes.
Are we trying to bring up an image that we're focusing on, or just the patterns and stuff when your eyes are closed? I was confused which way you're thinking or to do this.
You can choose to have a thought. Okay, like I suggested, what's your favorite food? That comes up. And then you just are aware of it instead of it just happening. And so that's see in. If your eyes are closed and you notice the dark screen, that's a see out, because it's a physical experience. And you label it, either one of them, see. Does that answer your question? And then next week, what we're going to do is the foundational technique is called See, Hear, Feel, Everything. It's an open awareness practice, and we'll start practicing with letting the mind wander to any of the categories and be mindful of it. Next week, we're going to focus on that, okay? So I want to thank you so much for showing up tonight. Please come back if this has been helpful, and keep doing what you're doing. Okay? Thank you.